Hello there YouTube and welcome back to another video, and today we have got a preview for episode 7 entitled Can You Hear Me? An episode that we knew very little of from the start of this series, and not too much of it as in the trailers either, so possibly going to have something big happen in this episode. The last time I thought that about an episode was Fugitive of the Jadoon, so yeah. Although I can't see this being as big as that one was. So Can You Hear Me is the 7th episode of Series 12, written by Charlene James and Chris Chibnall and directed by Emma Sullivan. So the synopsis for this episode is: from ancient Syria to present day Sheffield, and out in the wilds of space, something is stalking the Doctor and infecting people's nightmares. From ancient Syria to present... Oh no, hang on. Yeah. So this episode stars 2 guest actors, that's by names of Claire Hope Ashchi and Buram Tingang. I definitely butchered that name, but they play characters Rakea and Tiba respectively. I don't really know anything about them, so I can't really tell you what they've been in. But anyway, so yeah. So now what do I think is going to happen in this episode? Well, this episode's been spoken about being quite a scary episode. And quite creepy. And the villain in this episode, who I have no idea who he is, but he's giving me vibes of like the sort of Nightmare Man, sort of dream or nightmare, sort of Nightmare Man with sort of powers he has and what he does. And those are 2 characters that I loved. I loved the Nightmare Man in Zero Drain Adventures. I thought he was a good character, although I'm not so keen on the ending of that episode. The character itself was very well written and very well made up. And then Amy's Choice is one of my favourite Doctor Who's episodes, and I absolutely adore the Dream Lord in that episode. Quite a lot of it is probably just to do with the actor, because he's a brilliant actor and I do love him, and I loved him in Sherlock. But yeah, if he's anything like that character, I'm pretty certain I'll love him. But it's something that's quite an eerie. He has a weird tattoo thing on his head, which I think is going to be quite a key part of the story and a key part to who he is. I couldn't really make out what it was, but it's sort of tattoo on his head. And the way he sort of appears and disappears is quite eerie as well. There's a shot of a child and sort of set, and what I presume is the mother, sort of saying there's no such thing as the bogeyman, and then he says it's not true, which we see in the trailer. He just appears with this, and he solidifies from this big sort of shadowy gas sort of thing, and that seems like that look really creepy. So no matter how good or bad this episode is, it definitely looks like it's going to be quite creepy and quite unsettling throughout it. And it's set in quite a few places. So there's a bit that's set in somewhere in space, some sort of spaceship it looks like, then modern, then present day Sheffield, and then and 1380 Aleppo. So it's sort of set all over the place. I'm interested to see how that works. I'm assuming the companion is 4 parts, so it's going to be split up. The companions in modern day Sheffield, and then Doctor goes off to Aleppo for whatever reason. Maybe she picks up some sort of distress signal, or well, I doubt it, from 1380, but something that causes her to go there. And then from there they meet, and then they all go to a spaceship. That's how I think it's going to get set in those places, but that's just a guess. Now then, something that I do hope about that this story has is, in Praxis we didn't have any plot info at all. There was genuinely no mention to it. I mean, it was in Orphan 55 I was content with it, because Jodie's Doctor seemed to be a bit more serious and dark, not really darker, but a lot more serious toned. Then we had that mention of it at the start of the episode with her mood being bad. But in Praxis they didn't really mention it at all, and Jodie just seemed to, well, be how she was in Series 11. that did kind of bug me throughout the episode. So I hope in this episode we have something related to the plot. I mean, you would think that it's co-written by Chibnall, which means something will happen, but in Praxis, he co-wrote that, and that nothing happened in that episode. I don't really see why he co-wrote that, to be honest. I know, like, Moffat's co-written episodes that didn't really have too much plot relevance before, like episodes like Time Heist and The Caretaker, or even the Zygon Inversion. To be honest, the fact that this episode, until we found out the title of it, we pretty much knew absolutely nothing about, kind of hints that something big could potentially happen. I think the villain of this will have something to do, some relevance to do with that Timeless Child. Like, maybe he knows what it is, maybe he's a Time Lord, maybe he's connected to Ruth's Doctor. There's a number of possibilities set up by the series, because the series arc is absolutely insane. But it's certainly a villain that is interesting, and looks like we're taking, like, Praxis just... It's something that I'll get on to spin out of you, Praxis, but villain, there was not really a villain in Praxis, and that was something that bugged me a lot in Series 11. So it's annoying that they sort of done that again with Praxis, but this villain certainly looks like he's going to be threatening, and generally just quite a good villain. And actually, when something that this series has had, like, when you think of it, that the villains in this series have actually been quite good. I mean, the Skiffer are probably one of the weakest, and they were alright. We've had the Kastar villain, they were very creepy in Spiteful Part 1. Not as much in Spiteful Part 2, but that's because they had to focus on Daniel Barton and the Master, who were two great villains. Orphan 55, as much as it was in a great episode, Drake's were the standout part of it. The Skiffer were a bit just the typical Doctor Who monster, but the design of them is very good. Quite unsettling as well. The Jadoom were good for the role they played in an episode that was jam-packed with absolute brilliance. Yeah, I mean, even in Praxis, the virus was actually quite creepy as well, like how it killed people. So I'm just genuinely looking forward to seeing his villain, how it works, but really, apart from that, there's not much to really theorise about this episode. I've got high expectations of this episode, since the next sound trailers and what I've heard about it sounds pretty good. Also, I have heard there's a animated section of it, so God knows what that's about, but we'll find out, I guess. Yeah, so anyways, apart from that, thank you for watching this video. Please do leave a like if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you want to see more content, but I'll see you in the next video.